General Michael Hayden was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, appointed by President George W. Bush. He served from 2006 to 2009. Prior to becoming CIA director, he was the principal deputy director of national intelligence. General Hayden was director, National Security Agency, from 1999 to 2005. And since then has served as commander of the Air Intelligence Agency and as director of the Joint Command and Control Warfare Center. General, we're honored to have you this morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to be with you here this morning and this afternoon. A distinguished gathering of decision makers and policy makers here, and I'm the intel guy. And so I think I'm going to come at this discussion from the point of view of the intel guy, because that's who I am. And before I jump into the specifics, I need to give you a sense as to what it is I think that means, that I'm coming at this question as the intelligence guy. Intelligence works at the nexus of the world as it is and the world as we want it to be. And intelligence takes a pretty powerful role in those decision-making processes, but it's a peculiar role. You get into the same room that these distinguished gentlemen are in, but you come in through an entirely different door. Now, inherently, if I'm the fat guy talking to the vision guy, and the governor suggested this earlier, that vision guy is inherently optimistic. Otherwise, he wouldn't have applied for that job if he didn't think he could affect change. The intel guy never gets to set policy, but his responsibility should be to set the left and the right-hand boundaries of what constitutes the possible. Now, I have to tell you, I participated in that kind of dialogue about Iran multiple times in the Oval Office with President Bush and his team. And in fact, I would offer you the view that Iran, behind al-Qaeda, Iran was the second most discussed topic that we had during my time in government. President Bush had hundreds of questions about Iran that I would divide into two general baskets. One would be about the nuclear program, kind of the specifics of the physics there. And the other had to do with Iran itself and how it was governed, and particularly how the Iranian government made decisions. And I must tell you, as tough as those nuclear questions were, those were the ones I wanted. I would say, too, that President Bush, and I felt as if I had a very good relationship with him, he actually offered some impatience when it came to Iran and how much insight we could give him. I recall one incident when he said, "Mike, this isn't North Korea. It's not a closed society. We have some access. How come this is so opaque for us?" And in another instance, and again, I had a good relationship with the president. In another instance, he was kind of poking his finger at the middle of my chest, saying, "Mike, I don't ever want to be faced, Mike, I don't want any president ever to be faced with only two options. Okay? Accepting a nuclear-armed Iran or conducting major military activity against that state." So now I step back and I'm wondering, what are the fat guys, the guys that I left behind in my profession, what are the fat guys now telling the vision guys in our government with regard to these questions? I think the first thing they're telling them is, as has been mentioned several times before, Iran is on a path to nuclear capability. And I was quite struck with Chairman Hamilton's incredibly careful choice of words. He didn't quite say weapon, he said nuclear capability, and that's kind of where I am too. And in my personal view, if this is a weapon, I think the Iranians get right there. Okay, we got a kit in the garage, and we can put this thing together in a couple weeks, because having a weapon, and particularly testing a weapon, sets in motion a whole bunch of things that they don't want, and frankly, that they don't need. Now, how do you know they're that close? when my successor, be it Leon Panetta or someone else, goes into the President and says, Mr. President, they're so close, I can no longer tell you when it is they will actually have one. There's public commentary on the new National Intelligence Estimate that's coming out. I've not seen the document. I only know what I read in the paper, but it is the language that seems to be reflected in the press accounts parallels what I've just said. They're using the phrase virtual nuclear weapon, or my phrase now, permanent breakout. Okay? I think that's a reality. Now, that's really important because let me give you a second truth I think the fact guys should be given to the vision guys. The second truth is there is the very real possibility that this government in Iran, the one we're talking about now, the one that, about whose legitimacy we all have serious doubts, that this government is actually incapable of stopping that trajectory. Okay? Hear me out. Recall right after the Obama administration came in, we offered the Iranian government an arrangement by which they could take the LEU from Natanz, give it to a second or third party, change it into medical isotopes and return it to Iran. And by the way, that deal had nothing to do with stopping the centrifuges spinning in Natanz, which used to be the American red line. I mean, we had, just to summarize, we had moved our red line dramatically, had not challenged their right to spin centrifuges, in fact, implicitly accept their right to have uranium enriched at 20%. And do you recall they accepted the offer before they didn't? They were unable to pick up what was, I think, by any objective measure, a powerful concession. They were unable, because of whatever processes or dynamics inside that government, to say yes, even when it was, I think, in their own interest. We saw this play out 3 octaves below this. If you recall the 3 American hikers that are still indicted, 2 of them still in custody. Did you see the drama for the young lady? Yes, we're going to release her. No, we're not. She has to pay a fine. No, she doesn't. She's got to come back. How about bail? And then all of a sudden, she shows up in Oman. Okay? That's not rocket science, that decision. And look at the dysfunction in trying to get there. I think President Obama even recognizes this. As we ratchet up the last set of sanctions, which are indeed quite dramatic, he had a press availability with a bunch of thinkers on this subject, and the President is explicitly quoted by name as saying, the Iranian regime may be so ideologically committed to getting a weapon that no amount of pressure can dissuade them. That has tremendous policy implications if our goal is to shape regime thinking. If our premise is we can make this problem be solved by affecting how they think, affect how they think by engagement, affect how they think by sanctions. If you accept the premise I've just offered you, they're incapable of getting to yes, that makes all of that pretty much wasted effort. A third truism, I think the fact guys should be telling the vision guys. Regime behaviors and a whole bunch of other areas give us little hope for a changed relationship with this group. Now, it's mentioned already, well-known support for Syria, for Hezbollah, for Hamas. General Shelton mentioned some of the things that they have been doing in Iraq. How about this sentence? This is one that I formed when I was DCIA, when we were talking about the darkest days in Iraq with EFPs, recall the improvised explosive devices that were manufactured and designed by the Iranian regime. It was the policy of the Iranian government, approved at the highest levels of that government, to facilitate the killing of American and coalition soldiers in Iraq. Period. Now it doesn't get any more stark than that in talking about any regime's behavior. I was often asking government that if the Iranians get a weapon, could we deter their using it? Again, kind of accepting what some folks may fear is the inevitable. And I must admit, I was struck by the question, can we deter the Iranians from using that weapon? Because I frankly think, and again, fat guy talking to vision guy, I frankly think if you're talking about deterrence here and an Iranian weapon, we're not talking about deterring Iran. We're talking about Iran deterring us. Picture what an Iranian regime without a nuclear weapon is now doing, and then imagine what might such a regime with a weapon, even if it's a kit in the garage, as I suggested,